Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Once Upon a Train.
Hello, I'm Michael Campbell, your conductor for today. Do you know what was Walt Disney's favorite part of the Disneyland Railroad? Our Grand Circle tour is about just that, the Santa Fe and Disneyland Railroad Combine Coach. Our trip starts with Walt's childhood, continues on through the creation of Disneyland, journeys into the efforts to preserve and present the Combine, and ends at a place where you can actually visit this amazing artifact. We've got a clean stack and clear track, so welcome aboard.
As a teenager, Walt Disney was eager to get out and start exploring the world. He was given that opportunity in 1917 when he took a job as a newsbutch with the Van Nuys Interstate News Company in Kansas City. A newsbutch or butcher walked through the commuter cars of the era, selling newspapers, candy, soft drinks, and cigarettes. Walt would take his breaks in the baggage section of the train's Combine car, so named because they are a combination of areas for passengers and baggage. Many years later, Walt decided that his new Disneyland Railroad would have two types of trains, a rustic freight of the 1870s and a fancy passenger train circa 1890. Likely recalling his experience as a newsbutch, he wanted the passenger train to include an authentic Combine. There are a few important aspects of this decision. First, Stanford Research Associates, who advised Walt, recommended that there be 3 trains when Disneyland opened in 1955 to handle the predicted passenger volume. However, Walt had to pay for the trains himself by borrowing against his life insurance, and he could only afford to build 2. Second, there were no seats in the baggage section of the Combine. This meant reducing the railroad's capacity when it was already insufficient. Third, because Walt personally owned the railroad, guests were essentially paying him to ride, and fewer seats meant less income. Even so, the Combine was added to the roster because it was an authentic detail and a source of fond memories for Walt. This is one of many examples that Walt Disney did not create things chiefly for money. Construction of the passenger train started in 1954 at the Walt Disney Studio, under the meticulous direction of Disney legend Roger Broggie. The cars were crafted using methods that railroad coach builders used a century earlier. Hardwood sides, tongue and groove siding, shining brass fixtures. For safety and durability, the underframes were fabricated from steel. Eventually outgrowing the machine shop, much of the coach construction had to be done on the studio's enormous sound stages. It is fairly common for Imagineering concepts to go through several iterations before the final version. This early concept drawing by Eddie Sargent shows the Combine with a longer coach section and an additional passenger door. Because of their versatility, Combine cars were often used on rural branches and shortline railroads. They would provide U.S. mail delivery and package service to these agricultural communities. Naturally, the Santa Fe and Disneyland Railroad Combine needed to reflect that heritage. Interestingly, the name Wells Fargo and Company holds a prominent place on the Combine, but Wells Fargo Bank was not among the corporate participants of early Disneyland. Instead, Bank of America celebrated its long partnership with Walt Disney by operating a branch on Main Street, USA. This seeming incongruity is because when Wells Fargo and Company was established in 1852, it provided both banking and express services, better known as package delivery today. Even though famous for their stagecoaches, Wells Fargo partnered with many railroads of the era, and their name was often seen on freight and Combine cars. Walt's Combine held a star position in the Disneyland opening broadcast. It immediately followed the E.P. Ripley locomotive that was operated by Walt and carried the president of the Santa Fe Railroad and the governor of California. The Combine and the rest of the passenger train, known as Retlaw 1 among cast members of the time, carried millions of guests from 1955 until 1974. As you may know, Retlaw is Walter, spelled backwards. Although popular with guests, the passenger coaches just had 2 doors each, making them slow to load and unload. In 1974, the Combine, along with the rest of the passenger train, was retired. They then sat in the back of the Disneyland Roundhouse for the next 2 decades. The one exception was the Grand Canyon Observation Coach. It was transformed into the beautiful Lily Bell private coach in 1976. In the 1990s, park management decided to trade the remaining 5 Retlaw 1 cars to Bill Norrid, a prominent railroad preservationist. What did Disneyland receive in exchange for this trade? We explore that in another episode. After Bill Norrid's passing in 1998, his family sold 4 of those 5 Retlaw 1 cars to Rob Rossi, another prominent collector. The Norrid family retained the Combine because they knew it was both Walt and Bill's favorite. It was stored in a warehouse under the watchful eye of master craftsman Tim Legale, who had done significant restoration work on it. And there the Combine safely stayed for many years, awaiting an uncertain fate. In May 2009, Tim was visiting Walt Disney's Carolwood Barn in Griffith Park. I was volunteering as a docent that day, and Tim mentioned to me that the Nord family was concerned about the long-term care of the Combine. He asked if I knew anyone who would be interested in acquiring it. My first thought was that it could be a spectacular addition to the soon-to-open Walt Disney Family Museum. As I mentioned in another episode, I participated in the planning and the building of the museum. I spoke with Walt's daughter Diane and her son, Walter Miller, about the possibility of acquiring the Combine. While they were both eager to help preserve Walt's favorite train car, there was simply no room at the museum for a 38-foot-long 9-ton railcar. I then discussed the opportunity with Bill Barb and Fred Lack, who at the time were the president and vice president of the Carolwood Foundation. The Carolwood Foundation is the nonprofit organization that maintains and operates the Carolwood Barn on behalf of the Walt Disney Family Foundation. They discussed it with their board members and found enthusiastic interest in acquiring, restoring, and displaying the Combine. Interest by itself, of course, wouldn't cover the significant cost to finish the restoration work, move the coach to the barn, and build it a structure to keep it safe and out of the elements. The foundation asked me to serve as project director. I'd like to think that this was because of my experience leading major capital projects, but it's also possible that no one else wanted to do it. Fortunately, I had a volunteer army to help with this effort. I returned to Diane and Walter with this news. Their foundation made a generous, enormous donation to get us started, but there was still more fundraising to do. We made pins, buttons, and posters. These were offered at the barn and at the very first D23 Disney convention. The income from these items helped, but we needed some significant capital to acquire and preserve the Combine. Our first major fundraising event was a May 2010 rail trip aboard some private railcars. These traveled from Union Station in Los Angeles up to the Bay Area and back. In San Francisco, the Walt Disney Family Museum allowed us to host a special presentation about Walt and railroading. This show featured Disney legend Bob Gurr, author Michael Broggie, son of Roger Broggie, animation director John Kimball, son of Ward and Betty Kimball, and Imagineering creative executive Ray Spencer. In addition to that talk, each of these gentlemen offered up-close and personal presentations while aboard the beautiful private varnish cars. An auction of donated rare artifacts and original art provided much-needed income, and the event was a social and financial success. Shortly thereafter, we hosted Charlene and Carrie Norrid, Bill's widow and daughter, at Walt's Carolwood Barn to discuss the project and show them the care that would go into preserving and presenting this important artifact. On July 13th, 2010, almost 55 years to the day that the Wells Fargo Express Combine went into service, the Carolwood Foundation entered into an acquisition agreement with the Norrid family. Talented architect Miguel Fernandez volunteered to create a plot plan for the Combine at Walt's barn. It would showcase the Combine, but also enable us to remove it when we wanted. And it would be wanted. On November 13th, 2010, Walt Disney's favorite part of the Santa Fe and Disneyland Railroad arrived. The Carolwood Barn is often referred to as the birthplace of Imagineering. It's fitting that this coach, a result of his dreaming and doing, would live next to the barn where it all started. Tim Legale completed the restoration work that he had started with Bill Norrid. great care was taken to return it to a brand new condition. In a perfect example of things coming full circle, some members of the Disneyland paint shop crew volunteered to letter the coach, just like their predecessors did in 1955. The Combine contained the original baggage props, including 2 dynamite barrels, and these were carefully restored as well. Ray Cadd and Ray Spencer, our great friends at Walt Disney Imagineering, donated their immense talents to create this wonderful concept art of the shelter that would protect the Combine. Of course, making that real required real money, and that meant more fundraising. Remember Rob Rossi, the railroad collector I previously mentioned? His trains, including the 4 Retlaw 1 coaches, operate on the Pacific Coast Railroad near San Luis Obispo. On July 13, 2011, we reunited the Combine with her sister cars. They operated together for the first time since 1974. Crafted just for this event was a custom drumhead, a lit sign that was common on the last car of passenger trains, this one designed by Michael Aronson. Michael, the editor of these Once Upon a Train videos and a brilliant artist, also made a commemorative poster and cloisonne pins. We organized a private railcar trip to and from San Luis Obispo. This time, we were honored to feature Imagineer Ray Cadd, Pixar animator Jeff Pigeon, and Disney legends Tony Baxter and Floyd Norman. Bob Gurr was a surprise guest, and he used this opportunity to correct the myth that he designed the Retlaw 1 cars. He didn't. Another auction featuring original art, including this stunning view of the Combine by Ray Spencer, and other artifacts helped make this event a success all around. It was during this celebration that we announced our next fundraising event, a private tour of the Disneyland Roundhouse, followed by dinner at the exclusive Club 33. A highlight of that evening was a presentation by Imagineer Joel Fritchie, who revealed the science and engineering behind Disney rail attractions. We were also treated to a sneak preview of upcoming railroad art and collectibles by the Disney merchandise team. Of course, no Foundation event is complete without a custom pin designed by Michael Aronson.
Regarding Combine merchandise, very little has ever been produced, both figuratively and literally. There's this N-scale model that was part of a set that we had Bachmann Trains create as part of a celebration of the Disneyland Railroad's 50th anniversary in 2005. There's this HO gauge model that Tyco made as part of a Disneyland set in the early 1960s. And then there's this model, which I made, and it inadvertently turned into a much larger project than I anticipated.
Bachmann sold some of their G-gauge cars as unfinished kits. This included a nice Combine model. To help promote the preservation effort, I made one of these models and decorated it as the Disneyland version. I thought that a few other people might want one, so we offered it as a thank you gift for anyone who donated $1,000 or more to the Combine Preservation Project. Naively, I imagined that there might be just 2 or 3 people who'd be interested. We received 18 donations just to get this model. I realized I had just committed many days of my life to make them all. Fortunately, I was helped in this effort by Joe Jackson, a Disneyland steam train engineer, and David Shegog, master modeler and creator of the Castle Peak and Thunder Railroad. Bachmann Trains graciously donated all the kits. That humble little model I first made has had quite a life since then. It has run in the Disney Gallery, at the Walt Disney Family Museum, displayed at the Napa Valley Museum, and even went for a ride aboard the actual Combine. Speaking of the original Combine, it has made other journeys from its home at Walt Disney's barn. It was featured at the Fullerton Railroad Days Festival in 2012, where it was coupled, for the first time in its existence, to its sister, the Grand Canyon Observation Car, now transformed into the luxurious Lily Bell Presidential Coach. A Michael Aronson pin and poster, along with hats and t-shirts, helped raise additional funds for the project. There were discussions about displaying the coach on the Disneyland Railroad while it was closed for the Galaxy's Edge construction, and I wrote the copy for a sign that was to be displayed next to it. The Combine loan sadly didn't come together, but the park displayed the Combine sign in a few locations. This helped a new generation learn about this historic artifact. The Combine did return to Anaheim, though, It was a highlight at the 2017 D23 Disney Convention, exactly 7 years after being acquired by the Carolwood Foundation. All the funds raised over the years went to complete the restoration and construct a secure shelter. Although the shed's final design changed from the original concept art, it has a subtle and historic connection to Walt. It uses one of the original doors that were part of the railroad's 1955 roundhouse. Today, you can visit the Combine at Walt Disney's Carolwood Barn in Griffith Park, Los Angeles. The barn is open the third Sunday of each month, weather permitting. There's no admission fee, and even the parking is free. Donations are gratefully accepted and directly support the nonprofit Carolwood Foundation's mission to preserve and promote Walt Disney's railroad legacy. In addition to the folks I've mentioned, there are many more who made this project possible, and I wish I could name them all. Of special appreciation are the volunteer docents at the Carolwood Barn who, for almost 25 years, have taken excellent care of that collection and helped the public connect with Walt Disney, the person.
I especially want to thank Bill Barb, Steve DeGaetano, Bob Gurr, Doug Marsh, and Tom Morris for their assistance in the research and images for this episode. And finally, I want to thank all of you for joining us on a trip about a railroad car inspired by Walt Disney's childhood and propelled by his boundless imagination. Until next time, happy rails!
Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this Grand Circle tour on Once Upon a Train. For your convenience, the like and subscribe buttons will remain open for at least one additional hour. Thank you.